It is the Fenway Rundown. The podcast intro did not lead you astray. I'm Chris Cotillo, Sean McAdam here. It is the day before Thanksgiving. We have in previous years, I think before Sean's time, I did a podcast with my father on this day because we were that starved for content. The Red Sox took care of us that this week in that regard as we sit here one day later and dissect everything that has to do with the first big Red Sox move of the offseason. In case you missed it yesterday, Sonny Gray is a member of the Red Sox. There was rumors about that happening about 10 years ago. They quieted for a decade, and then they picked right back up yesterday. Red Sox sending Brandon Clarke and Richard Fitts to the Cardinals. The Cardinals sending $20 million to Boston to facilitate the deal. There's complicated contract stuff. There's complicated, um, negotiations. He waived a no trade clause. It wasn't your easy deal. We'll get to all of it, what it means for the Red Sox roster and everything. But we'll just start with the off the cuff reactions. We'll have to simulate them because it is 24 hours later. But Sean, when that news first broke and things started happening yesterday, I was surprised because this was not a name, and we have talked about a lot of good free agents and a lot of good trade candidates. This was not a name that had really been linked to the Red Sox. It didn't seem like the type of guy they were going to go for. We'll get to that. Were you also, as surprised as I was when it happened?
Yeah, I was. I agree. This was not a name that was in circulation. There had been a lot of Joe Ryan talk, a lot of Hunter Green, a lot of Sandy Alcantara, the usual suspects, some of whom were pursued at the trade deadline last summer. I think there were some discussions with the Cardinals about Sonny Gray last July that never got very far, and they were revisited pretty early this offseason. My initial take, and it's one that I maintain now that 24 hours has passed, is that Sonny Gray makes the Red Sox rotation better. My lasting question is how much better? And to me, while Gray is a very solid, above average major league starter, he doesn't fit the profile of what uh, Craig Breslow outlined after the season, and then again more recently at the GM meetings as somebody who could quote slot in right behind uh, Garrett Crochet as a 1A, 1B, or number two. Again, they're better because Sonny Gray's in the rotation, but I'm not sure that this is the top of the rotation number two starter that they had identified as a big need. And, it isn't that I thought they gave up too much for him. I just thought sitting here today in late November that maybe they didn't aim high enough for their upgrade.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest question and one that I think, you know, I've urged Red Sox fans for years so you can't get mad at them for things they haven't done yet. But in this case, I think the writing is on the wall a little bit. We can't sit here, even, after doing some reporting yesterday and trying to be as plugged in as possible and everything, and tell you they're not going to go sign a top free agent pitcher, or they're not going to go get somebody in a trade that fits the bill as that 1B or a number two. But the chances of that happening decreased significantly in my mind yesterday. And here's why I think um, you know, there's two buckets. I think there's some fans that look at it and be like, oh well, he's a nice depth addition. He's a nice 3 or 4 guy, but there's another move coming. I know you didn't look at it like that at all. You thought like, nope, this is what they were talking about. I could have seen it going either way, but now I'm more on the side of things that you are, and it's because in conversations both publicly with Breslow yesterday on the Zoom, and privately talking to people who know what the Red Sox are going to be doing, if they were going to be targeting a true like 1B ace, obviously Scooble's in a league of his own, um, but people in that next bucket from Ryan to Gore to Green, Alcantara, Peralta on the trade market to Valdez, Cease, King, Zach Gallen, whoever you want to talk about, am I on the free agent market? If they were going to be truly, kind of hell bent on getting one of those guys, I think the messaging from, at least privately yesterday from the team would have been like, Yeah, we got Gray. It was an opportunity that we couldn't pass up, but we're full steam ahead on this pursuit for a real guy. And that's not what it was. Like the messaging was, we're really happy we got Sonny now. We're going to kind of change the tune and change the focus to an impact bat. Craig Breslow said, well, I just gave you my explicit to-do list and wish list a couple weeks ago. Now, I'm not going to rule anything out. We'll see what materializes. Maybe, maybe not. There was no like strong, no, this is just a step and you should expect something bigger, which to me, I think speaks volumes about kind of the plan. So, can I guarantee with 100% certainty Sonny Gray is the most impactful big name starting rotation addition they make this offseason? Of course not. It's November 25th. Literally no one on the market is signed. Nobody has gotten traded other than him. But at this juncture, I'd say it is more likely than not, right? I mean, I think you have to look at it that way. And I think if that's the case, I think Red Sox fans are justified to be underwhelmed and disappointed, especially because they jumped the market for this. They didn't wait around and
Right.
see where the chips fell and go get Sonny Gray. They went out and made the first salvo, right? And so I think that's
Yeah, and
kind
that
of a weird
suggests
mix.
that suggests that this was somebody that they had really targeted
Right.
as
And
the
I don't
guy
blame
they
them
wanted all.
necessarily for that, but we'll get to it.
What's that?
I don't blame them necessarily for really liking his profile, but
Yeah, as I
it just
said,
doesn't fit the
they're
need
better than
perfectly.
they were 24 hours ago with their starting rotation. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody can dispute that. It's a matter of how much did they improve if this is the only real addition they're making. And
I'll flip it on you.
I
Do you think it's the only one?
yeah, I do. I mean, not shutting the door. There are always things that happen that you don't anticipate. There may be a trade proposal down the road. There may be a guy who slips to them on a free agent deal that they didn't think was going to be as affordable as it turned out to be. We know we've done this long enough to know that you can't make absolute statements uh, even before Thanksgiving about where a team is going to go on the free agent or trade market. There are things that could happen still, but all the signaling yesterday was like, no, this is the guy we wanted, and now we have the rotation that we anticipated, and now we're going to focus on getting a bat and addressing some other things on the roster. And I maintain that, if we're getting into labels and we're putting people in certain cubby holes here, that Sonny Gray is far closer to a very good number three than he is to a two or a 1B. And, maybe we're getting hung up in that nomenclature. And, Breslow didn't want to do that for a number of reasons, said, it doesn't make a ton of sense to identify a number two guy here in November. I understand that. But from everything we hear, this was the one that they were going for, and now they're going to shift to other needs. And as I said, uh, Gray makes them better. I don't think they gave up too much for him, but I just wonder if they took a big enough step.
Yeah, I mean, the two, I think, questions to ask yourself there are I should get this printed on bumper stickers because of how often I've uttered this phrase over the last few weeks. But my target for the starting pitching upgrade for the last month has been everybody now better than Bayo, right? Like a guy who is clearly an upgrade over him, not somebody in that realm. And so you could also look at it, and I know you wrote this in one of your columns yesterday. Better than Giolito, I thought was like the floor. I think Giolito and Gray had similar years counting wise last year. It looks, if you really look at it, Giolito had a worse under the hood year with better results. Gray had a better under the hood year with worse results, so it kind of brought them toward each other. We could debate for hours about the value of expected, things like that. I think, a lot of people look at them and pretty strongly at the end of the day. I think you're a believer in ERA is ERA. It is what it is. It plays out on the field. Um, is he better than Giolito? Probably. Yeah, and there's, more strikeout and there's more, things like that. Is he better than Bayo? I mean, I don't know, right? Like at this stage, entering age 36, like there's just To me, it's not clear. And the whole point was that it should be clear that you're better than Brian Bayo. And I say that like Brian Bayo is terrible. No, but we know the profile, right? He's a guy with a ton of upside, has a lot of good outings, but who they didn't trust to get through the third inning in a big playoff game in New York. Would they trust Sonny Gray in that situation because he has the experience? I mean, I don't know, right? Like we can't project 11 months out. So, um, to me, like Framber Valdez, Dylan Cease, Joe Ryan, Gore, Freddie Peralta, they're better than Bayo. Pretty clearly, right? I don't know that you can look at that with Sonny Gray with 100% certainty. And when I've drawn the bar there, it's like, okay, this makes a little less sense now.
Yeah, and the question got asked, and it was funny. I was, we're all waiting to ask our questions on Zoom, and Alex Spear beat me to the punch and phrased it almost exactly as I was ready to, and that is
He
was
went to Harvard,
part of yes, I did not part of
the Harvard of
Gray's
Rhode Island.
part of Gray's appeal that he is only a 1 year commitment and you are not blocking the development of deep breath here, Tolley, Early, Harrison, Dobbins, Perales, all these guys in the pipeline that are obviously going to be a big part of the rotation going forward. Probably a good part of the rotation this year. How many spots they take up, we'll see. Will depend on health and performance of others that may be ahead of them right now. But to me, that's what some of this said. Now, you might ask, well, if they were willing to go all in on a guy who only had a year of control, why not Freddie Peralta over Sonny Gray? Peralta
Yeah,
has clearly outperformed Gray the last couple of years. We're also hearing that the Brewers are setting a very high standard. If they're going to deal Peralta at all, Milwaukee has designs on winning the NL Central. We can pretty obviously conclude that the Cardinals do not. They are holding an auction there where they will move Arenado and Donovan and all kinds of people on that roster and Sonny Gray. So maybe Peralta, maybe the asking price was such that they balked, or maybe they got flat out told, we're not moving him. We're going to use him to try to win again. But if they had made this same trade, maybe upped the return and gave up more and gotten Freddie Peralta, I'd be a lot happier because I think he's a better pitcher. He's also considerably younger. He's coming off a very good season. Gray is coming off a rather mediocre season. You have an ERA that starts with a 4, and we can look under the hood and look at expected outcome and look at FIP and look at all the things. And certainly his strikeout to walk ratio is encouraging. He still has good stuff. He still has swing and miss. But Freddie Peralta has been a better pitcher over the last couple of years. And if you were willing to, take on a guy that only had a year of control, that you weren't worried about how long you were
right.
going to get out of this guy, then I picked Freddie Peralta over Sonny Gray every day.
Yeah, obviously it's a sliding scale with the value and things like that. I do want to say, kind of dovetailing off the point you were making about all the guys they have in the rotation. Obviously, that group of like 8 or 9 took a hit yesterday because Richard Fitz was traded. He won't be competing for a rotation spot here. He will in St. Louis, or I guess Jupiter to be exact. I think this is kind of almost not proof, but further credence to the theory that they are not going to add another big name starter. Is that you start really MLB front offices? I don't know if you noticed this, like I have. Absolutely love the term runway now. They just say runway all the time, so I'll use it and pretend that I too went to an Ivy League school. Um, their runway to let some of these young pitchers do big things in spring training and earn a spot on the team and emerge, shrinks based on how many, veterans or other guys they plug in. Obviously, they were going to get one, right? In that 1A, 1B, 2, now Gray bucket. So you can obviously slot in Crochet, you can slot in Gray and Bayo, and then you have those 2 slots. And I think we've all said all along that we both have said all along that we think there's very capable arms to fill those two slots. Early obviously I think has the inside track. Dobbins is a guy we both really like and fans should. Totally probably has the highest upside out of all of them, if not a finished product. Luis Perales isn't even a guy we discuss. Just from Harrison to early Tolley, Dobbins, all these different guys, they can find, and that's the young group. And then you have Cutter Crawford, who again, I say this every single podcast, led the team in innings in 2024 and is no slouch. And Patrick Sandoval, who was a good starter for the Angels for years, and people just
and gives them another veteran lefty.
yeah. So like, but okay, let's say there's seven guys in that mix. You can find two of them to be kind of anchors. Obviously, people are going to get hurt. We saw that last year. We see it every year. Like to have those seven or eight guys competing for one spot, I don't think is super attractive to them. Like, at a certain point, what's the point of having all these guys if they're kind of blocked? Again, injuries are going to take care of that at some point, but we're in the era of Red Sox baseball where there's too many starters and too much depth, which they haven't had for years. But you get the general point. Like if you add Gray and then you add, that's why in our offseason previews we were saying in terms of quantity, it's going to be one really good starter. It's not going to be one good one and one okay one. It's going to because they just don't they don't want to block all these guys. Um, Maybe that, becomes an easier issue if there's a trade to be had where you're moving early, but I don't think they want to do that, right? Or they're moving Dobbins. Obviously, we've seen them move, now Fitz and Priester in the last year from that bucket. But like to me, I think that that's a good spot to be in where you can figure out your four and five from that group of seven, group of eight, young guys, older guys, reclamation in a way with Sandoval and Crawford. I know you can make guys relievers and guys can step up, but to me, I think they want to keep those pathways open, which is another reason why I just kind of doubt that they go and get somebody else.
Right. And, fans may not want to hear this as being a factor, but it undeniably is. There's also the cost, the salary of these
Right,
guys. You're looking at, you're paying Sandoval a decent amount of money this year
right.
as part of a 2-year deal.
It's
So
like
he may
10
take
million
up
or
one of
something.
those,
Yep.
but you're going to have somebody in that rotation, be it Early, be it Tolley, be it even Crawford, who is ARB eligible but isn't going to make any real money. You're going to have somebody making way less than $2 million in that rotation, and possibly someone making significantly less than $1 million, i.e., just over the minimum at 775 or 780, whatever it is going to be
Right.
for 2026. And the potential down the road as some of these guys age out, as Gray will, unless he gets extended somehow here. He'll be moving on after 26, and you'll replace a guy who is earning, $35 million next year with a guy who's going to make a million the year after that. And while people can complain about the focus on minimum salary guys, that sort of freedom allows you to allocate the money elsewhere on the roster.
Yeah.
And
Well,
there's no question that the most expensive thing to try to acquire, and we're not just talking about what you have to give up in terms of player cost, but there's nothing more expensive on the free agent market than veteran pitching.
mhm.
And if you can have a couple of homegrown guys with low service time and pay them just over the minimum for a couple of years, that gives you a lot of maneuverability on the payroll to allocate to other needs on the roster.
And we'll put it this way, the CBT, of course, there's some guys that are making more than this in real money, and some guys that are making less than this in real money, but the CBT counts for the rotation as of right now, 28 for Crochet, 21 for Gray. That makes him the third highest payer on the highest paid player behind Crochet and Story. So 28 for Crochet, 21 for Gray. That's 49. You get to Bayo making just over on the CBT nine. We're at 58. Sandoval making nine. We're at 67. You get down to Crawford making three. So just those guys, before you even get into the Tolley and Harrison, all those negligible deals, that's about 70 million, kind of dedicated to the rotation. are they going to go and have $90 million rotation to sign a free agent pitcher at 95? I mean,
Yeah, I mean
that
closer to 100 probably if you're going
right.
on the free agent market. If you're going after Dylan Cease or Valdez, guys at the top of that class, you're going to pay close to 30 million a year.
Right. And I mean, it's just for a team that I don't think they have endless amounts of money to spend. I use Red Sox payroll on Twitter, does an absolutely phenomenal job. Last year, the CBT number finished at 248.64. Right now, they're at 224.99. So they are, only about 25 short of, where they were last year, and they still need
And
that
about
bat.
20 million short of hitting that first threshold.
And so to me, like where you look at, I think they're going to exceed the threshold. I could see them flirting with, they're going to have to because they're going to need the bat. They're going to need to fill holes, even if they don't, even if they sign Schwarber or Alonso or Bregman and give them 30, 31, 32, there's other holes to be filled. They're still going to add veterans and other, the
They need a
complementary bat
lefty.
we've heard
They need a
about.
veteran lefty reliever that's going to
Right.
cost them at least 5 million.
So it's just tough to see where this other magical number two starter fits in. So, I mean, I know that sucks to hear for Red Sox fans. And I think, you look at Twitter and you look at the response yesterday, and people are like, this is just a step. This is just a guy, and they'll go get the number two. To me, I find it hard to put the puzzle pieces together as we sit here. But you know what? If they were to pull it off somehow, where they get Gray and you have Crochet, a legit 1B, better than Bayo guy, Gray, Bayo, and then the cavalcade of options they have, that's a very, very good group. And I just don't necessarily trust they're going to do it.
Yeah, nor do I. I mean, it doesn't seem like um, what we've heard privately and publicly that there are plans to try to slip somebody between Gray and Crochet. That this was the target, and in terms of the rotation, unless they, find somebody out there for on a 1 year deal, a back end guy to provide additional depth, and depth does not seem to be an issue right now. It's more about being a little more top heavy. It looks like they're satisfied with what they have. And we should be fair. This is, as presently constituted, an above average rotation.
Of course, yeah,
It isn't like, whoa, how are they going to win with this? You can imagine this being a good rotation with the ability to have a lot of guys contribute for those final two spots and a lot of depth to protect them against the injuries that they were overwhelmed with at times last year. Um, but it isn't quite the dramatic upgrade that people, I think, had been anticipating.
let's get to the return quickly. You didn't think it was that much. I think Fitz is a guy who could be, pretty good in a major league rotation as a four or a five. He's a guy who burst onto the scene and had a lot of good outings here, kind of hit the wall. And, to me, we talked about this, I think, when we talked about the grades at the end of the year. He was a guy that, I don't think the Red Sox had, bad intentions when they were dealing with him, but just the role he was in he was kind of screwed around with all year. Would go 15 days without starting because he'd get scratched, and then he'd be almost called up, but then not. And then they were going to move him to the bullpen, but then they released Bueller. They rushed
He
him
got
the
an
game you'd
emergency
covered.
start in
Right.
Milwaukee
The
that
game you'd
nobody saw
covered there.
coming.
Where that they rushed him back. What was supposed to be a rehab outing, it was in the big leagues. Those things for a young pitcher can't be easy. And you look at it, and he had a chance to take a step forward and kind of didn't. Early on, he was good. He got hurt twice, which he's never been hurt in his whole career as a minor leaguer. Not a guy I'd necessarily give up on. He's not without talent or future potential. But when you look at the group, I would take Dobbins over him. I would take Tully and Early over
Yep.
him. Crawford, we kind of know what he is at this point. The potential is Sandoval. So he's a guy that, while very close to the next man up at the beginning of last year when he actually made the rotation as the number four and beat out Priester and beat out some of these guys. At this point, I think, other guys have passed him, and that's, not a knock. The Cardinals clearly had interest. I think Clarke is a really, really interesting guy because the upside is tremendous. No sure thing. But, I was trying to think if I was imagining this or not yesterday. He was a guy who like Baseball America wrote has more helium, which is another baseball code word for fast rising prospect than anybody in the game. They wrote that at the end of July when he struck out 56 in his first 35 innings. He was ranked the number 81 prospect in baseball. He was like ahead not in terms of level, though he's probably close at that time, ahead on the rankings of Tolley and Early.
Totally and early. Yeah.
And Harrison had just gotten to the organization. Clarke was looked at as the best pitching prospect in the organization. He then dealt with like blisters and hangnails that made it like impossible to control the ball, and he ended up, really kind of not pitching for the last couple months of the season. The Red Sox were not going to force that and make it worse. That to me is something that can probably be easily resolved, not an arm, an elbow, or a shoulder. Han Bloom yesterday in his comments, I just wrote it for the website we work for. He said, um, in terms of pure talent, in terms of what's coming out of his hand, the extension that he gets, he's up there with anybody that's in the minor leagues. You really could put him on that short list of highest upside, most talented pitchers in the minors. Very raw. Um, but to me, you're giving up a floor guy in Fitz and a ceiling guy in Clarke. I judge this as how I first react. I saw the passing tweet as we were digging for the return yesterday. Uh, I think it's not like, oh my God, they were fleeced necessarily, but considering that the Cardinals only picked up 20 million and not like 30 or 35, I think it was a high price to pay in terms of, a guy with huge upside in Clarke and a guy who is, not a slouch in our mind and fits. It's obviously not, you're not giving up early or some of these guys that you look at the top of your, or Meyer a year ago, or probably even at the same level as, Teal and Montgomery were in that Crochet trade. Obviously, different types of things. But I think for a 36-year-old 1 year rental, to have to pay him 21 million and then give up two guys who are pretty good, it's not a bargain by any means.
No, it's and it wasn't, we shouldn't expect that it was going to be. I
No.
mean, Sonny Gray is an above average, established, healthy major league starter.
Yep.
Those guys have value. And whether it was Freddie Peralta or Sonny Gray or whoever else might have had a year or two of control remaining, you're going to have to pay for that. Think about uh, the Orioles getting Corbin Burns a couple of years ago with a year of control left. They had to give up some pretty good young talent to make that deal, and you're always going to overpay at least a little bit or pay a high price for successful, healthy, established starting pitching. And, could Clarke hit for them down the road? Sure. Could he be an erratic guy who never is much better than, a late bullpen arm? That's also possible. I don't have an issue with what they gave up. I don't think they overpaid. I think you go into these kind of deals knowing that you're going to have to pay a high price to get somebody of Gray's accomplishment and value and standing, and that's what ended up happening.
Yep. And so that is the first major Red Sox move of the offseason. Not one we anticipated. There's other stuff going on. They were linked to JT Realmuto yesterday, about a minute before this broke. I don't really see it. There's obviously a lot of, pieces out on the market. The Mets need an outfielder. There's all these after effects we were going to talk about on a regularly scheduled Fenway Rundown today. Obviously, that's all pushed. Next week will look a little different. I am taking some time off. Of course, that means they will make another move. But so we're not sure exactly what the podcast will look like, but there'll be something. Sean, what do you have in store for the fine people?
You tell me.
All right, good.
We'll get to that after I push myself away from the table on Thursday.
That's fair. Well, we say this every year. It's true. Thankful to all of you for listening. Thankful to all of you for reading. Have a great Thanksgiving and appreciate you listening to the Fenway Rundown.